Did you know the Harlem Renaissance didn't only happen in Harlem? Welcome back to Theater History Thursdays. Today's topic is Harlem Renaissance, Part 2. Although the Harlem Renaissance was centered in New York City, it influenced cultural, artistic, and social movements across the United States and even abroad. Washington, D.C. had the largest Black population from 1900s to the 1920s. And there was a thriving African American intellectual and artistic community fostered and supported by Black newspapers, theaters, and educational institutions, especially Howard University. Alain Locke, acknowledged as the dean of the Harlem Renaissance, was a professor of philosophy at Howard University, and his writings would inspire a generation of writers and activists. We're going to introduce you to two of the amazing women who would leave a lasting legacy for Black theater. Georgia Douglas Johnson, poet, playwright, and cultural organizer, was the leader of the movement in D.C. Her home, which became known as the S Street Salon, was a safe and supportive atmosphere where the luminaries of the Harlem Renaissance could meet, socialize, discuss their work, and exchange ideas. Johnson called it her halfway house because she was always willing to shelter artists in need. Johnson wrote many plays, but only 28 are still available to us. Several were featured in the African American magazines Crisis and Opportunity, but only 2 were produced in her lifetime. This seems to be because they addressed difficult and controversial subjects, including lynching, and she refused to give her plays happy endings. 2 of her plays were included in the anthology, which dramatized African American history for children. Mae Miller, also a poet as well as a playwright, was mentored at the S Street Salon. She wrote more than 30 plays between 1925 and 1943, including 21 acts, and her subject matter addressed many common issues with other Black writers of the time, including lynching. But almost uniquely, Miller's plays advocated for a more hopeful future for relations between African Americans and whites. She had been raised in the integrated but isolated world of Howard University. And although she was realistic about the barriers for Black people, she believed in a common humanity that might rise above those differences. In 1935, she contributed to and co-edited, and in 1943 she only focused on writing poetry, and was invited to read some at President Jimmy Carter's inauguration. New Perspectives Theater Company has actively contributed to preserving and celebrating the legacy of Harlem Renaissance writers by staging readings of Georgia Douglas Johnson, Mae Miller, and other key figures from that era through On Her Shoulders, which works to restore historically overlooked women who wrote plays to the rightful place in the theatrical canon. That's it for Harlem Renaissance Part 2. Stay tuned for more theater history with New Perspectives Theater Company.